Hello everyone, welcome back to another episode of r/Malicious Compliance. In today's episode, cooks should know not to mess with the cook. Don't make others uncomfortable? Stop acting like a teacher, so I did. Before we get started, make sure to subscribe so you will never miss a video. So let's get started. Cooks should know not to mess with the cook. I was on base, working the sandwich bar in the dining facility. I had a long line of customers because when I worked the sandwich bar, I added way more food than I was supposed to. As I'm rushing to get the soldiers in and out, I get a female SGT and she informs me that she is a cook for the other dining facility on base. Naive me thinks she's trying to be friendly, but instead she walks over to the utensil rack, takes a fork, brings it to me, and in her most Karen and loud voice says, "So I know you're supposed to use a fork to grab the deli meat." She's not wrong. I was using my gloved hands, like they do at the restaurant, because it's really hard to get the tightly packed deli meat separated, and I'm trying to work faster so I don't get in trouble for having a long line. Even though she was right about the rule, I was still upset with her because of the way she said it. She cared more about putting me down than the actual rule. Proof: first of all, it's unsanitary for me to use a fork that she touched with her dirty hands. She knows that. But I do it anyways because she's a sergeant. The first slice of meat separates perfectly and I put it on her sandwich. But that second slice is married to the next one and will not budge. So now I'm scraping at the meat and it starts to shred. She gets frustrated, but I'm loving it. As I shred the meat some more, she barks at me to just put both slices on her sandwich. To which I reply, "Sorry, I can't do that. As you know, the rules are only 2 slices of meat per sandwich." I never followed that rule, which is why I had a long line of customers. Once the meat is completely shredded, it finally separates. I figured no reason to stop there, and I made her the ugliest sandwich possible. It was so bad that when I looked at the next SGT in line, he held up his hands in surrender and quietly said, "You can use your hands for my sandwich." Don't make others uncomfortable? This is long, but it has to be to provide the needed details about what happened. About 10 years ago, I worked in a team of scientists, which is almost enough to drop the mic right here, when one day our boss told me others perceived me as contemptuous. I was shocked beyond words. I certainly did not feel superior or feel contempt for anyone. I was so flabbergasted I was silent for probably 2 solid minutes. I asked for an example of when something I had said or done gave someone that feeling. He said he couldn't divulge that information. Okay. Then I asked for an example he had experienced or observed himself. He said he had none. I said, "Since I have no clue what I've done, how am I supposed to adjust my behavior?" He said he didn't know. I said, "Basically then, I just need to not talk?" He said he wasn't sure. I knew right then what to do. I am pretty introverted, and as a child I didn't talk for years. I rarely spoke until I was about 13 years old. Got lots of notes from teachers about how quiet I was. I would answer questions when directly asked, but rarely spoke otherwise. So, my malicious compliance in this situation was easy for me. I just stopped talking except when asked a question. I made a point of smiling, showing I was listening, nodding agreement, etc. I was extremely polite and agreeable. Pretty soon some big issues came up that I had specific knowledge about. I knew how to solve them, but no one else asked. A huge conflict came up between 2 of our labs because one group wanted it one way and the other group had a different opinion. They fought and fought. People were having secret meetings in their offices to try to win. And when they finally arrived at the action they chose, it was wrong. In fact, both groups were wrong. And the whole experiment failed. It's important to know no one was hurt, no property damage or anything like that. Just a lot of wasted time and expense on materials. But I never said a word. This went on for 3 weeks. The lab's budget had to be revised. They had to cut travel expenses, which I was okay with because I didn't want to travel anyway. So, no conferences for anyone. This is a big deal for a lot of researchers because it's how we gain notoriety to be able to get grants, among other things. Finally, a colleague asked me why I hadn't spoken for so long, why I was so quiet. Was something wrong? I explained about being told others perceive me as contemptuous. She had the same expression I did when I was told. She said she didn't believe anyone had said that about me. I honestly was surprised again because I believed our boss. Then she asked me what I thought about the experiment design and why it was failing. I told her about the solution I believed would work, which was actually surprisingly simple. She recognized it had a good chance of succeeding and asked me to share the idea at the next department meeting. At that meeting, she asked me again in front of everyone, and I repeated what I told her. Several people asked why I hadn't spoken up sooner. I explained I had been given feedback that indicated I caused others to feel uncomfortable. The whole table of colleagues also looked stunned at me. I said I was committed to not causing such bad feelings and couldn't figure out how to communicate because the feedback didn't give me any specific guidance. Everyone looked at the director at that point and he said, "We shouldn't discuss personnel issues." Ha! It was my issue, so I said, "If anyone here perceives me as contemptuous and said as much to our boss, that's the reason I haven't been talking. If you don't feel that way about me, let me know and I will stop being silent." Someone else said we needed to hold a vote so there wouldn't be any more confusion or talking behind anyone's back. They voted 100% for me to talk normally and that they didn't agree that I was ever contemptuous. That director slowly stopped coming to work, month by month after this episode, until he was only showing up 1 day a week. Finally, he took a lab position elsewhere and one of my colleagues was promoted to director. And the experiment was a success. The next year, I got a grant to keep the research going and paid for 2 people to be able to travel to the related conference to present our findings. Stop acting like a teacher, so I did. 3 years ago, I started working in a company where my manager was a piece of sh*t that would insult us and blame any problem on his employees, trying to get them against each other. I got burned out after about a year of 10-hour days and weekends and of doing tasks that were greatly above my paycheck and completely different from what I was promised as I got there. So I gave my resignations. My manager, though I was useless as he often said about anyone but himself, so instead of trying to find a new employee, he decided he would have taken over my role, to the horror of all my co-workers. The only problem, I was the only person who knew perfectly the company ERP program, and I would have had to teach him my 5-year experience in 2 weeks. As I started to teach him, he got more and more frustrated and terrified by the amount of workload that was coming his way and started to insult me even more, but I was still trying to teach him the best I could for the sake of my co-workers. All of this until the first day of my last week. I was pointing out a mistake he was making every time he did a certain task, and he replied screaming at me, "Shut up. I don't need you to act as a teacher." So, malicious compliance, I didn't. I just sat beside him for the next and last 5 days, not teaching him anything, and every time he couldn't remember how to do something, I would jokingly cheer him up, telling him I was sure he could come up with the solution himself if he focused enough. When problems would come up that I still didn't have the time to solve, I would tell him, "I don't know how this thing happened, it never happened to me, you should contact the client service, they thought me everything when I needed." The peak of this was when he got so frustrated that he started to repeatedly slam his mouse against the desk and then sat there staring blankly at the screen for 10 minutes. I had to actually keep myself from laughing in his face. After I left, I spent the next 2 months getting called almost daily by my ex-colleagues to help them find files or solve problems that they couldn't find an answer for and that I didn't have the time to teach them, as I had to stay with the manager all the time. If you made it to the end of the video, thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe and share, and we will see you in the next video.